Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and we also have.
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
Now I'm going to hand this off to Cal. He's going to talk about this post that's on Instagram.
I happened to come across this the other day. I mean, I don't think the guy quite understood because he's like, oh, according to Justice of Inflation, we've been paying the current comic prices since the 1990s. It's not quite that, but a lot of times I hear guys complaining about how expensive comics are, but then you look and saying, dude, we've been like on frozen time with comics, for decades. We've been getting a break where everything else had been going up exponentially in comparison. Gas, milk, bread, the stuff that you actually needed to live. Comic books were only increasing, literally cents on the dollar for decades at this point. So now, you're looking, oh, comic book is $3.99. Well, that always bugs me because of the complaints they make. You can't go and buy a candy bar for 40 cents anymore. Okay, they're like $1 and change. You can't go buy milk, for 50 cents. You can't get bread for a dime, and you can't get a comic book for 75 cents. But the mentality of comic guys, especially guys who've been buying a long period of time, is so. I mean, it's frustrating because they're like, oh, these should never be higher than the price that I'm willing to pay for them. They're like, what's a comic? $5. Oh my God, it's $5. Can't pay for that. No, we've actually, when you think about it, we are actually paying a relatively low price, for this particular thing of entertainment in comparison to movies, in comparison to video games, like prices, we're actually getting a pretty good deal if you look, all things considered.
Well, one of the things, and I definitely agree everything you're saying. I want to first point out, if you look at these prices here, now one of the things is they kind of fudge their numbers here. So you want to say it was not actually 75 cents. It was like 65 cents in 1985.
About, yeah.
The what's the name? Secret Wars was 75 cents. And I was looking it up. They have they have some that listed as like a dollar. No, I'm sorry, at 75 cents. No, actually as a dollar. And I couldn't believe it because I didn't remember being 10 cents more. And this is like, you're still getting the 23, what is it, the 22 pages, and not paying 10 cents more for Secret Wars. That's probably why I stopped buying it. But you know,
Or you, the guy in the store, 10 cents more.
well, no, I don't think I paid attention to it. I think because as I went along, I didn't believe this 1990s number either. So if you imagine this, the price of the comics was like, not all of them were a dollar, but they were about to be a dollar at this stage. So if you look at it, this is like the price of maybe, I don't think even X-Men #1 is that. I think the Baxter issues, those that Baxter paper stuff, those were the higher prices.
Yeah, that was like the prelude to those prestige format books that would come out a wee bit later.
Yeah, so you had these books that were kind of this price, but the regular comic price was what you get on the newsstand would probably be a dollar. And when looking at it, I was also surprised to find out that comics were 75 cents in 1990, and then the changeover happened with the X-Men in 1988. So in 1988, X-Men moved to a dollar like early in the year. Everything else was 75 cents. And then what's the other thing? Excluding like any sort of Baxter paper books and annuals. Then you go to the next year, mid-year, the rest of the comics go to a dollar, while the X-Men's already been a dollar. Now the X-Men didn't need to go to a dollar because it's the #1 selling book. So they already always have double-sized issues and all that other stuff, of anniversary issues within the thing. Like, why would they turn it up to that much? But the point of it being, it wouldn't be, they'd have to adjust these sort of prices for that. But because when they go to these other later dates, they're like, oh, but at the same time, these later date things are around the price of what you see magazines are like. And people probably look at magazines and be like, oh, this is outrage. A comic book. Do I have any regular like The comic book over here, this is like, here's a comic book. Here's this comic book. A magazine is yay big and it's another, but magazine has a ton of ads that are also paying for it. They're just paying, the price, the cover price is more for the paper stock and the actual quality of it, which comic books, thanks to Image, up the ante as far as the color and the paper stock. So we got what they said the fans wanted, a better paper, project. But the people kind of look at it and say, hey, look at this, I can get a magazine, but you'd be paging through, pick up any magazine. For the thing you got on the cover, you probably get 2 pages of that outside of things like something like Time magazine or something where you're going to read through the entire book, and try to keep up with current events. Most of the sort of entertainment mags or like interviews and stuff like that, you're going to have to weed through a lot of stuff to get to what you want, and a lot of ads, So it's a thing where you had things, and the magazine market was booming when in the 90s. It was a big deal. Like I had a bunch of those. So it's like these prices aren't, if you were like, most of the people were either my age or maybe 10, 15 years younger, that sort of thing. And they were buying magazines or whatever, they're Maxim and all that other stuff along with the comic books. Because Wizard, and they're buying Wizard, which is like, way more than $1. So these prices aren't too crazy for the comic fans. And this sort of stabilization, but it's still kind of going up because it's $4.99, that sort of thing. But it hasn't been moving as you're saying in recent times. But it's like, where can you go? They already almost pricing it out. Oh, this book, $10. Lord. But,
Well, I didn't have it. Thankfully, was a kid. I didn't have, I knew this guy who, the practice I would have is if I thought a book was going to hit, I would buy one copy for me and then I'd have another copy to hold on to for later. And this guy was buying, he'd buy like 10, 15, 20 copies, that sort of stuff. And I didn't understand that because I was like, I didn't have the discretionary income to do that. But I could buy a comic if I wanted to. I bought a whole bunch, stacked them down. They weren't so expensive for me at that point where I couldn't get them. And as prices went up, it wasn't that it was more expensive. It just really my taste, and a lot of them I wasn't interested. So that's what really got me buying less at that point. The characters, or rather the storylines, were just like, hey, you know what? There's just nothing here for me, unfortunately. But I would, this was early on. I remember going and buying these hardcovers, slipcase, this type of stuff, prestige format books, and I would pony up the money for it. I would go, I've got like a couple of bookcases filled with that type of stuff. The, large trades, hardcovers, and those beautiful absolute editions that came out, after some time, which I found out some great information about. But I was throwing down money for that type of stuff. So when guys are like, oh my goodness, the prices are going up, I'm like, are you kidding me? That's great. If you want to get into this hardcover game, with the, what was that? What did Marvel come out with? The Marvel Masterworks?
Yeah.
And the Marvel Masterworks were like $50. They were like $50 each. But that's one of the reasons why they're so sought after now, because a lot of guys are like, oh, no, forget that. But then, of course, what happens? You finally got some gainful employment. And you're like, oh, I wouldn't mind get that Marvel Masterworks. How much is it now? $250. Why is it so expensive? Because there wasn't a large print run on it. Okay. And then anybody who's giving it up at this point is going to go and they're going to put a premium price on it. Low print, it was low print at the end of the day. And, it's just, it's worth the money because of what the situation was. So those were like the expensive books, but the stuff coming off the shelf, especially to be quite honest, the stuff that's coming off now, I was happy with Mando paper. I remember that was supposed to be a big deal. We're going to high quality Mando paper. I was like, okay, this is fine. That was, if you were reading Alpha Flight at the time, a book like Alpha Flight, that was Mando paper. It was good. Colors were fine. But if you look at the stuff that you're paying for now in terms of the paper quality, these cardstock covers, the colors, all of that type of stuff, I would expect to pay more for that type of production quality. That's one. And then you got to pay for the people who are doing the people who are producing the book. I'm not talking about Marvel. I'm talking about artist, writer, all those people on it, well, yeah, they're gonna have to get paid. They're gonna have to get paid as well, and that all factors in. But I just, $5 for $5 for a comic book, and I'm not buying every single one off the shelf. It's just not that big of a deal. And then in comparison to a lot of the other stuff that you would still look to buy, maybe with the exception of like large pack baseball cards, everything else has significantly risen in price. But the biggest problem with comics is they're really not geared towards kids anymore. So you can't, if you were trying to gear them towards kids, you'd have to do the manga stuff with the big thick books and the cheaper paper. And that's just not where they are, because a lot of guys do collect them, for the art, for the cover art. And so you want, that packaging, also reflects that at the end of the day. But if you really wanted to get that other stuff where, I want something, cheap, then you got to go get those showcase editions, the DC, if they're still even producing them with that newspaper print, black and white, then you can go get a whole bunch of stories there. But the stuff that they're coming off with now, the production qualities are really high. And the idea of, it's too expensive. No, guys, it's how much money? It's $5. No, take that off my pull list. This, that, and the other. I think, maybe this just isn't for you anymore. Maybe something else that's a little bit more affordable is, more your stilo, because that's where they're gonna go with these type of production qualities. But at least even if the numbers aren't quite accurate, over the long scape, just based on my memory alone, if you're collecting comics, you're making out pretty well in terms of what you're paying for, okay, as opposed to whatever the inflation rate may be, and then in comparison to other avenues of entertainment or collectibles.
Yeah, it's one of those things where ultimately, if you're looking at it as a kid sort of entertainment sort of thing, it's obviously, if you can, I'll be right there. If looking at that sort of thing and saying, all right, for this $3.99, we can get a book or something like that. But hold on, what's up? So you have this sort of thing where you're like saying people always talk about the bang for your money, but at the same time, you look at it for the market that fans like us and what you're talking about, it's even, I had to keep in mind like 95, right? And at that point, I was still sort of buying like Image comics. And, comics also had the promise of someone starting out and then becoming something. And at this stage in 95, there's one artist I was checking that was like, like I didn't know he was going to be big, but he's in a book I used to read, which was Supreme, and this Joe Bennett. And then at 2000, Joe Bennett was all over Marvel. He was doing Nova. He did Machine Man. He did some gorgeous stuff at this period. And then now he's the biggest thing at Marvel doing the Immortal Hulk. So it's one of those things where they don't have much payouts like that anymore, because in the 70s, 75, you have Byrne and Perez, and you get the payoff in the 80s where these guys are big titans. So I don't even really, that works into your budget, and you got to work your budget out there. And it is definitely what you're saying, but it's like there's some rewards in being around from time to time and experiencing these things. I always go to 95 where I was kind of getting out of collecting everything and kind of trying to just go back to where I used to buy stuff. So have a bunch of comic books and I got to put this back, put that back. And now this is what I'll be reading. And then of course, 2000 was crazy. So it was like Heroes Return. There's stuff Byrne was doing at Marvel. There's DC was still going on with stuff. They had the Superman titles, which had some good artists on there. So there's interesting that during those periods, there's always stuff to kind of really bring me back. And after that stage, is kind of just checking to see what's there after that. So it wasn't as crazy as before, but that's a good, decent run from here till say about 2005, where I wasn't, losing it for the price. It was more like it's still an addiction, which it still sort of is. So,
Yeah, well, I don't know. I might have told you this already. I had 2 bouts where I stopped collecting comics.
Mm-hmm.
One, I was really young, and it was just, had them, they would get too much around, and I ended up probably just discarding them at the end of the day. But I was really young at the time. And the second time I was at university, and I had stopped collecting for maybe the better part of a year. Then I
Mhm.
changed my mind and I got back into it. And I said, look, I needed to make a decision. Either I was going to collect for life or I was just going to stop, because trying to get all the books that I missed in that year was more expensive than if I had just been collecting them regularly. Because what I do find with a lot of guys is they'll pass on a book. They'll look at the book, how much? I don't want it. I don't want it. Then if you're a collector and you really want to have the collection complete and you want the stories, then later on you go back and you're like, oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I want to find that book. And when you're trying to find it, now you can't find it. And now you got to pay double the price, if not more, to get this book. And then you got these guys who are like, well, the other guys, I want to hit every flea market. I'm going to wait for every auction until I can finally find it for $1, which is more work than just paying $5 for it, for me at the end of the day. But uh, I just find, collectors at the end of the day will find ways to make it more affordable. So even if it's like a $4 book or a $5 book, you'll do a sale. You'll join a store so you can get a discount. You'll pre-order whatever it is at that point. But when I take that into account, like I can go and pre-order, say with some stores and get up to a 40% discount. So if I look at that, I'm still not paying regular price. So I'm still making out better than, all these numbers that these guys are showing right here. And
Well,
I haven't been paying regular price for years.
well, we're not the thing is a lot of the old pros that kind of gave up comics the same way my father did. Whereas like some of them, I think most of them did what my father did, where they had them and then they chucked them at some point in their life.
Oh, sacrilege.
And then there's a stage, I think, where was it John Byrne talks about his mother kind of pushing him to get out of it, not looking at him reading other things, but books and comic books, where he kind of got rid of his stuff. But then when he came back, I guess he's in college, and he was like he had to buy back everything that he already had and hunt for that stuff. Where we're kind of in the stage where you didn't really toss your comic books during that period, right? You just didn't stop buying new books.
The first period or the second period?
The first period.
No, the first period, those are gone, and I had some nice books
Awesome.
there.
Wow. Okay.
But I
So
was like, again, I was really young. I was really young at that point when I got rid of those. And the second time was at university. But I mean, at one point, because I did stuff where now I'm looking like, man, but I mean, that was pretty much what it was at the time. I had a run of Batman from issue 200 to like issue 500 at the time, and I just didn't have the space anymore. So I was like, okay. So I ended up getting rid of a box full of Batman books at that point. And mind you, this is consecutive from 200 on.
mhm.
And I got rid of that box for $100 and $100 of store credit. I'm pretty certain that box is worth exponentially more right now. But that was the stuff that I did. That was the stuff I did at that time because I didn't have the space. I wasn't interested in reading Batman anymore. The only Batman books I would read were the Elseworlds or the specials. The regular book was just not interesting to me long, and that would just became like this dead box. I was more interested in Superman and the Incredible Hulk at the time, and so my collection was pretty much around there. I mean, that collection is pretty much still part of the overall collection that I have now. But the first one discarded. The second one, I was planning on holding on to stuff, but I just kept on with it because I genuinely enjoy collecting comics. For
Mhm.
me, I think the other day I was able to catch was it? I forget it was reading Jupiter's Legacy for the first time.
Mhm.
And it was just nice to sit down and enjoy it. I was like, hey, the story's interesting, and I really like Frank Whiteley's art. And the tactile experience of sitting down, turning the pages, reading it, it's just not an experience you get with something else. It's not like reading a novel or playing a video game or watching a television program. The experience is different, and the interaction is different with a comic book. So it's just something I've always enjoyed. But I'm also happy when I look at this, like, look, at the end of the day, if there's one thing I want anybody to take from this, comic books overall are pretty affordable. You know, they are. I'm not telling you to go out and go buy, 10 a week. That might be more than your budget at this point. But the idea that, oh, the prices are too high, the price, like, $5 for a comic is really not that big of a deal. And the $5 is for the more prestigious one, the cardstock ones. You can still get a book for $3.99 without a problem. So take that into account. Maybe talk to your store, get yourself on one of those nice little pre-order lists, or join the store so you can get like a discount. I know stores give some pretty good discounts over here, and enjoy the comic collecting. We're beating inflation, people. We're beating inflation.
Well, yeah, so I never really stopped because of the money, because at the same time when I stopped, it was a period of kind of looking at it and not understanding, like, because you're getting this sort of, especially in the 80s, like this John Steinbeck type of drama and Greek sort of tragedy during the 80s, and this is like across the board in all of my favorite books: the X-Men, FF, Alpha Flight, Thor. Like they all had this heavy layer of tragedy in them, and it's like seeing the gut-wrenching sort of things that the heroes are going through, and some of them struggling after the fact. And this is even before Alan Moore came on the scene. So it's kind of like, oh my God, am I going to put myself through this? And then understanding that there are writers on this, not thinking that these guys are real anymore. It's just like, before that, it's like, oh, why are they acting different? And now it's like, oh, this writer, God damn it, how could he do that? And then I'm still buying like back issues from time to time and looking
That's
at
funny.
the older stuff. But then it's like, I think around the time when The Dark Knight and Man of Steel happened, and it was just like, oh, and it was a chance buy on The Dark Knight, because the guy that was on the rugby store, he was trying to sell me on The Dark Knight, and he was like, it's like, I'm looking at it, I'm not saying it is on the ground floor on the Frank Miller series, but it looks very different. And he's kind of like not really selling me on like Frank Miller, just selling me on Batman. And it's like, this guy don't know anything. I was like, I don't know this one. And that was the thing where I looked at the price, I was like, oh, this one's kind of up there. And then I said, oh, let me put it down, and I read it. And that was one that I brought that to Tilden. That was one of the books I brought to school with me. I hadn't brought many comic books, and I did let some people read it. And people were kind of iffy on the art because it didn't look like Frank Miller. They were just like, oh, this is a great story. I don't like the art. And that's why I was getting a lot of people that were coming back after reading it. And then I always say, when I went to Village Comics looking for The Dark Knight again, at that point, issue 3 is out. And I was like, issue 3? It's like, I don't remember it being that far away the last time I've been here to a comic store. But there was gaps going on for me at that period. So I'm like, oh, I'll buy this.
Issue 3 was late.
And I was like, so that gives you the time of me not understanding how much this gap between me going to comic stores. I guess I was just in the city, so I was like always, whenever I was in the city, I'd find time to go to Village Comics. And then I turn and I look up on the wall, I'm like, $15 for issue 2 of The Dark Knight? Yep. And then I'm like, oh, the first one, oh, that one's 50? I was like, that's crazy. I'm in my mind, it's like, that came out last week. Like, and if I'm on 3, who knows how late it was in between when I last went to a store. But it was like that kind of put the bug back in me, and the collectability part too. So it was like that, Man of Steel happened, and Marvel, I think I did was on the ground floor of the Punisher stuff, but that was a little too. That was, even though the writing was pretty decent, it was kind of like turning into Commando. At the end, he'd kind of shoot up everything. So it's kind of like, the writing in these things are pretty good, but it ends up with being all guns. Like, am I going to read this every time? And I was like, oh, you know what? I should have stuck with reading it, because it had a lot of people that went to the X-Men later. Jim Lee, and I did buy Punisher War Journal, but Willis Portacio did the regular series. So there was stuff that I was coming back to, and then I had to buy back the Fantastic Fours. Only some of the X-Men, because the X-Men cost too much even at that stage, where I couldn't get it close to cover price. So I think a friend of mine years later gave me some of those 80s X-Men that I hadn't bought. So I got a lot of those, like someone giving up their collection. So I got to read some of those ones that I missed in that time. So it was like that. And then I missed Born Again. So at that point, that's a definite tragedy type story where I was now in line to read and be like, wow, I get it.
Well, that's definitely your Steinbeck stuff, like
So it was like, but that's where it was.
like Of Mice and Spider-Man, that type of stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things, even the lesser ones would be Spider-Man having this effect of leaving not going to grad school anymore, and Aunt May being sad and just like, and so that wasn't as gut wrenching as some of the other stuff, but there's a lot of other stuff that was really gut wrenching. And then this one, so I was real in line to realize, oh no, I should be, I should be okay with them kind of pushing the boundaries, because it was happening in like almost every book, and not even the Hank Pym stuff is like across the board. So, but going back to what you said, reading all the old books that I didn't, buying all the old books that I didn't buy, and it's just like, oh, sweat. It's all this stuff was good. I was totally wrong. All the stuff is a lot of fun. And nowadays I'm kind of iffy on those X-Men issues because it was really a gruff period. But when I got to read them, I started to really enjoy more of the art, because at the time I was really finicky of John Romita Jr.'s art, and then like going back and seeing those books, was like, oh, okay, his storytelling is always good. So even if I didn't say, oh, this is the way my X-Men is supposed to look. So yeah, that's your comic enjoyment shouldn't be necessarily falling, because that's the thing. If you're out of it because of the price, then you weren't even coming back, and you were the ones of people that gave it up, and it's understandable. You moved on, you got more interest in other things, your money needs to go other places that make sense. But anyone fighting over this price, and that's the thing, I come to the end of the day and I go to the comic store and I got comics that are like, whoa, 10 to 8.99, 4.99. Okay, somebody's got to go back, but I still come out with some books. And then sometimes there's just, oh, look at the covers, look at the trades, maybe, and that's the thing. But anyone that's still killing themselves trying to say the price and all that stuff, and maybe if they did try to get the paper to a cheaper price, it's hard to say that it would work, because we had a 10-cent adventure from Superman and Batman, but we haven't had any of those experiments in a long time. Even the Untold Tales, which was 99 cents the first issue, then it went to like $1 and change. So.
They don't work. I mean, as much as these guys complain about prices and so on and so forth, there's still the collectible nature of it. And if it's like widespread, oh yeah, it was great, it was nice, it was 10 cents, but then nobody retains them. A lot of people don't, really pick them up, and I don't know. It's almost schizophrenic at the end of the day, because if it's cheap, guys, oh, it's cheap. If it's expensive, oh, I'm not buying it. And then it turns into the same market that I'm used to dealing with, where I look and I'm like, oh, that's a winner. Look at that cover. Who did this? Look at the art. Look at the story. Oh yeah, that's great. I'm going to pick this up and I'll wait and let it mature. And it always does. I mean, but it's a lot faster now. I mean, the comic market that I got introduced to, when you're selling a comic, is that, you come over, you're selling a book for $10. Guy would be like, well, could you do 5? And you maybe had, then you started this ridiculous negotiation to try to get to a better price, even though the book is pretty much worth $10. Now you got guys coming in and you'll say, hey, they'll be like, hey, how much is that book? Oh, it's $20. Okay. And that's the end of it. There's no negotiating. They just come and they buy it. They got the discretionary income. They're like, I want the book. I can afford it. That's it. There's, no haggling. It changed a lot. So now when the haggler comes over, you're like, who? You need to get the hell out of here. You're wasting time. There's going to be some guys over here with some real money. But that's what happens, when the prices do increase to where they're going now. It does. I mean, it's already a niche market, but it is going to attract the guys who have the discretionary income. And maybe again, if you're a little, if you're frugal, you can definitely find some workarounds, that type of stuff. But that's a large part of where it's been tracking. And I used to tell guys, look, just be savvy about it, because you don't want to get priced out of certain books. Because a lot of these books that are, I remember like the first appearance of Carnage. That was an affordable book for a really long time. Okay, really long time. And then I think the last time I picked up a couple of copies were like $80 each. which a lot of guys would have been like, no, $80 gonna try to haggle. And I said, I don't, why are you trying to haggle? This guy's gonna be making a movie appearance in a couple of years. And you know he's gonna make a movie appearance. By the time the movie appearance comes out, this is gonna be a $300 book, maybe a $400 book, depending on the condition of it. So why would you wanna, just get it? Get it now. You'll be happy that you spent $80 on it. Because I have already been in that situation where you didn't spend $80. And then when you look at it again, you're like, oh, it's how much? And then $80 looks like it was like a bargain. But it was just about understanding where the market is, what this book is at the time. And do you really want it? If you really want it, it's not, well, I'll wait and see. No, sometimes you got to bite the bullet and just buy it. And that's something that I'm hoping that when you see prices, even if they go up a little bit, guys are a little, especially serious collectors, understand, yeah, let me just put the money down now, because $4 is a lot easier than 80, and 80 is a lot easier than 300. Okay, and then you run the risk of you can't even get the book and it's not graded. Where then it becomes like, forget about it now, you got nothing but like graded copies, and graded copies always go for a premium. So, looking at it, I just think comic books are still quite affordable. They're quite manageable at the end of the day. And, let's look at some, you look at some of those numbers. Okay, I understand that comic guys like to moan too. Woe is me, and, look how this, and it's all terrible, and it's all bad. Well, no, it's not. We got a lot of good stuff to look forward to. And, the fact that comic books are, again, these things are overly affordable is something that we should take to heart. So, hey, why don't you take us out?
Well, thank you guys for watching. We also like to say, that's the thing. There's some good things out there. And then if you're not liking the cover prices of that, when you go out there and you get these editions, it's way more, but it's so cool. So what are we griping about, fans? So that's it. We're going to say Spinnerack.
Out.
Later.